talk about challenges, the biggest challenge is that most people still do think Georgia is in the United States in the South. So it still is that way. People always mix up when I say, I'm going back to Georgia. Oh, they make wine in Atlanta. No, they don't. Other than that, I think actually Georgia is so solidly on its way. And I was thinking today, what other country that has tried to enter the market post-Soviet era has had the success of Georgia? No one. Even Hungary hasn't. I think that Georgia immediately, the second round, like in the past few years, has carved such a niche for itself. Yes, in a small world, but has gained so much important press. I think it's well underway. So I don't think the challenge is how to break into the market because it's already there. The challenge will be how to differentiate the wines that are made in this country, what the path is. Is Georgia going to be the trailblazer for a country who really gets behind organic viticulture? No one else has done this. No one. Austria has tried, not so great. So will it be that? Will it be Quevri? But you don't want to make everybody have to make Quevri wines. Winemakers need to be free. They need to make their own expression. So I think for me, the biggest challenge for Georgia is to help the grower who is coming out of home winemaking into commercial winemaking and to allow the steps in place for them to actually make a living as a winemaker. That's just starting. So I think internally, how is that going to play off the bigger players? The bigger players will always have a place in the market. But the respect of Georgia will be based on the small winemaker. And that's a long answer for a short question, but let me take it further. I was thinking there's an analogy to champagne. 5 years ago, the grower champagne market was 2.6%, and they told me it would never grow. And by grower, meaning, it's the Moet Chandon, the LVMH brands, which basically make most of the wine there. But it was the grower that got the respect. And now, just a few years later, it's up to 5%, which they said couldn't be done. And it's what the market writes about, it's what the connoisseur drinks. And yes, people drink Cliquot, they drink Moet, that's not going away, they will make money. But as far as on the really important wine list, it's the small grower, and that is the path of Georgia as I see it. Hey Joe, take a walk on the wild side. Natural Quevri winemaking is something that Georgia really does own. So I don't know to what extent it will be legislated in the future. But I know that in the markets that people know about Georgian wines, they do confuse it with Georgian natural wines. So, they're not one, but for the most part, that's what people associate with. Like, define natural wine as nothing added, nothing taken away, but if you need a little bit of sulfur, we get a pass. But that would be the only additive. And there's, that's my definition. I think it's really, it's an artisanal product, but it depends on nature. And if nature gives you a lot of rain, if there's a lot of rotted grapes, yes, you can do a lot in selection, but sometimes you need a little antibiotic, sometimes you need a little sulfur. And I know some winemakers in Georgia, some winemakers around the world, who would rather sell their firstborn than add sulfur to a wine. And that's okay. And they won't sell their firstborn and they won't add sulfur. Yeah, but if somebody else, I mean, really wants to add 20 parts per million, like, I'm not going to say no. I think that allowance needs to be there. One has to be a little bit forgiving. Sometimes, you know, we live in a world where everything is radicalized, and it's important to have principles and philosophy, but sometimes you have to ease up a little bit, depending on what nature gives you. That's what I think. As far as a definition, I think it's inevitable, though I don't like the idea of it on a legal level.